going to go ahead and get started. We want to make sure we get started on time. We said this will be at 10 o'clock. My name is Maria Holt. I'm with Racial Justice Now. I'm a co-founder with Professor Cornelia Randall here. I'm a parent of a student in Dayton Public School District. And today we're here to release the first ever school discipline Ohio report card. Recently, the report card for academics and other measures have been released, but this is the first ever school discipline report card that actually assigns 11th grade to each school district in this state based on, each public school district in this state based on the school discipline measures. And so Racial Justice Now is a community-based organization, we're a parent organization. We have a number of members from teachers to parents, clergy. And so a lot of our work is surrounding school discipline, specifically right now in the Dayton Public School District. We are also in collaboration through the Week of Action with Dignity in Schools campaign, which is a national campaign that we're a part of. And the Week of Action is October 4th through October 11th. Dignity in Schools campaign is a national campaign that focuses on school push-out of students, especially students of color, LGBTQ students, and other disadvantaged groups. I'll let Professor Randall introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Professor Emeritus Cornelia Randall. I am Emeritus from the University of Dayton School of Law. And as Maria says, I'm a co-founder with her of Racial Justice Now. The report that we did is a data-based report. We didn't interview school districts to see what programs they had. We didn't interview them to see their perspective on what's going on. We used the Ohio Department of Education data released for 2013-2014 in August. And so I think that's an important thing to remember, because every school will say, well, we have this program and we have that program, and that may be true, but this report is not based on that kind of information. This report is just based on available data on the internet, essentially, through the Department of Education. So why do a school discipline report? Part of the issue for us was that there is a need to to be able to measure over time how schools are doing. This is the first report. It will not be the last report. And part of what we hope is that schools will begin to pay attention to the data they report, because one of the limitations of this study was that lots of schools didn't report data, and it was clear that they weren't reporting data. But we elected to give them a 0 where data wasn't reported, because our view is that the data ought to be available to parents that's their reporting requirement, and that if it's not available, then that's like a person not turning in a report to a student. They get a 0, or incomplete reports. When looking at the school discipline, our tagline is, how well does the school perform in preventing the school to prison pipeline? So then we had to think about what factors measured by the data can help us understand how a school is doing. We came up with 3 basic factors. One, the expulsion rate. And that's a term that we're using to include both suspensions and expulsions. So how large of an expulsion rate do they have? Subjective discipline rate. Subjective discipline meaning what percentage of the discipline is for non-violent behavior that should be correctable within the schools. And I'll talk a little bit about that more. And then obviously our big issue is racial disparity. In terms of, is there a racial disparity, not just black and white, but any racial disparity. Is there a racial group that is being suspended significantly more than another racial group, the lowest racial group in the school district? So as you can see in what we hand out, we divided, the grade was based on 30% of the overall grade was based on the expulsion rate. 20% of the overall grade was based on the subjective discipline, and 50% was based on racial disparity. This is racial justice now, that is our interest. So, looking at that, we had quite a few school districts. We did 1,067 school districts, and that included public school district, charter schools, and joint vocational schools. It did not include non-public private schools. Okay. The median was 31.9, and the mean was 34.6. So that median, half the school districts scored less than 31.6. Charter schools had a lower mean score than public schools. Urban schools districts had a lower mean score than other school districts. All of them were failing. No school district had
This is for the county.
This is for the state and for the state. Thank you. So to talk briefly about expulsions, we calculated the expulsion rate by first taking the rate that the Ohio Advanced Report had and assigning a grade. We developed a grading system, we assigned a grade, but then we subtracted penalty scores. And we subtracted penalty scores for two different groups of students, preschool to third grade and 7th through 9th grade. And we did that because we believe that for preschool through third grade, that in terms of stopping the pipeline, it's essential to keep people in school and teaching them the appropriate behavior at that early age. That suspension, we know through all kinds of research that suspension doesn't change behavior. So sending kids home at that early age doesn't really change their behavior and increases the likelihood that the behavior will continue. And so there was a P schools. So this ended up a penalty score for that. We also decided over extension of 7th and 9th grade that the studies show that suspensions in the 9th grade in particular results in higher dropout rate. And so we decided to do a penalty score for that. Charter schools had the lowest score. The average grade was 51.7. The median grade was 72.5. So people were doing a fairly good job on the expulsions. Charter schools did worse than public schools in this area, and urban schools did worse than other types. Suburban, rural, small towns. So that's the expulsions factor. The next factor was the subjective discipline. For this, we said that more than 50% of your discipline as disobedient and disruptive behavior was inappropriate. And that, and we graded on a scale and for that. for that factor, looking at the percentage of discipline for disruptive and disobedient behavior. We also subtracted penalty scores for two factors that we decided represented sort of inappropriate discipline. One, the use of truancy, or the idea that suspending someone who doesn't want to be in school doesn't actually help, and the use of tobacco. And for that, that's represented. There's a lot of things in the discipline code that we believe shouldn't be disciplined, but the use of tobacco is one where we believe that suspension out of school is inappropriate and represents that. The mean grade was 30.9, the median was 20. Charter schools were worse than public schools, urban schools were worse than other areas. The other thing that we want to mention here is we think this disobedient, disruptive behavior, defiance, is where implicit bias occurs, implicit racial bias. And so when you find significant differences based on in this area, it's because you're having differences in implicit bias, both at the teacher level, principal level, and then it's reinforced by not being checked by administrators. Then finally, we had the racial disparity score. We calculated a ratio in which we divided the rate for this racial group with the highest suspension by the rate for with the lowest suspension. Initially, we was going to do black and white, and we changed the methodology because it's not all black and white. A lot of mixed race kids are being, black is coming in second and third in a lot of areas, but mixed race kids and Hispanics are, and by focusing on black and white, we would miss that. We also decided not to, some school districts have a large racial disparity for whites, and we decided not to compensate for that, to any racial disparity, on the idea that whatever causes a significant, we're talking about 3, 4, 5, 6 times, 100 times, 200 times, whatever's causing that racial disparity could easily be transferred to another group overnight. And so the existence of the ability to and the willingness to over-discipline one group is based on race is what we looked at. So we then assigned a grade based on that calculated rate. If a school didn't have a racial disparity rate, and there's a couple of reasons why a school would not have a racial disparity rate. One is they reported information only on one group. So they said they had black suspensions, but they reported nothing else, okay? Or they reported nothing. So we decided that we did not want to privilege the lack of reporting by giving a grade or discounting. So we actually gave a 0 wherever there was where there was not a racial. We also where there was no racial rate. Now, there were a number of schools who reported information and the racial disparity was 0. That is, they had no difference between their groups. Those groups got 100. Okay, so we're not talking about giving a 0 for people who don't have a racial disparity. We're talking about people who didn't report information. And The other issue is that there could be schools that are targeted based on race, and we recognize that. But we felt like that we didn't want to privilege the lack of diversity, and so we gave a 0 there. Then we ended up with some school districts that had outrageous, in our mind, that's a value judgment, but the rate difference was like 3, 4, 5, 600 times. And we just felt like that needed to be reflected. It wasn't enough to give them a 0. You make a grading scale, and they're below that grading scale, but there are a lot of people below that grading scale. And so we decided that to divide the rate by 100 and subtract a point for every 1 point. And for some schools, that was like 30 points. Some schools had a really huge racial disparity rate. In terms of racial disparity, the maximum possible grade was 100, and the minimum possible grade was a -7. The mean grade was 24.5, and the median grade was 0. Again, charter schools, in fact, in this case, charter schools, public schools did better than charter schools, small towns did better than urban schools, which is a consistent pattern. So the limitation, I'll be happy to answer any report. We have a handout that gives you specific information on Miami Valley. All of this information in excruciating detail is up on the internet. So there's over maybe 400 or 500 pages up on the internet. Each one of these factors in very significant detail. You can find out what your school district did on the expulsion rate, what your school district did in the subjective discipline, what your school district did to the racial discipline. I think the last thing that I want to, 2 things before I pass it, is that, again, I want to emphasize the limitation of this report. It's a database report. It is an object. It's a critique to say that our school has a lot of program, and that's right. And we didn't look at people's programs. It's a critique to say that the data is old. That's not correct. The data is the most recent data on the Ohio Advanced Report. Each school district has data, but in order to compare different school districts, we have to use a common source of data, and that common source is the Ohio Advanced Report. The interesting thing is Miami Valley, if you want to take a look at it, is that it may be shocking for some of the school districts for the first time to be receiving an F on something. Centerville, Oakwood, Kettering, the usual suspects, aren't the only ones doing poorly on this report.
So I'll pick it up one more time. So from a parent's point of view, I think this information is just as valuable as the other school report cards that are put out by the state. I think that school discipline, especially as an African American parent, is extremely important. I think that parents can use this in a number of different ways. Parents use the other reports to decide what school they would like to put their child in. They can also use this report to make a decision as well, depending on the type of, depending on what is important to them, what's valuable to them. School discipline is really important to them. I think this document is very useful for parents of African American boys in particular. I think this is great. great. I think that since the U.S. Department of Education, jointly with the Department of Justice, released their guidance in January of this year, I think that this report can also be used to file civil rights complaints. Obviously, this data is extremely disturbing. As Professor Randall said, even the school districts who are normally considered the so-called good districts as far as the other grades are concerned, did very poorly when it comes to racial disparity. And so I think that, with the guidance, again, coming from the federal government, this data can then absolutely be used in a civil rights complaint for parents who are having trouble with their children being overly suspended for subjective and discipline, and if their children are being suspended at higher rates than other children for the same types of behavior, this information is extremely valuable. So I'm excited that this report is out. I believe that this is the first report like this, not just in this state, but in the nation, to actually look at it from the data perspective and assign a grade based on racial disparity. And I think for parents, even for parents with students with disabilities, I think that this would be, because unfortunately students with disabilities also, African American students plus with a disability, the rates for those students are astronomically high. And I think that, again, with the civil rights complaint, parents need to know that they do have recourse. Parents need to know they have recourse. You can file a complaint if you're not getting satisfactory, not getting, your issue resolved with the school district themselves in a satisfactory manner. You can go to the federal government and file a complaint. And there's also resources out there and agencies that will help you file a complaint. For myself, I've actually filed a complaint on behalf of my son on my own when he was in preschool. Remember, this starts in preschool. This starts when they're literally babies, 3, 4, 5 years old. And so the federal government is a recourse when it comes to that, to investigate and give you some satisfaction, hopefully. So I think that's with that. Also, we will have a more in-depth community meeting tonight at Wesley Community Center. So if you guys know any parents, anybody who will be interested in this, tell them we'll be there from 6:30, 6 to 7:30. The media is also aware of that when they're invited to that as well. So we'll have a more in-depth discussion for parents and other concerned community members tonight at Wesley Community Center. So, questions? Comments?
What made you guys want to look at this and do this study? You said it was the first of its kind.
For me, I've had trouble as a parent, and I got involved. I'm an activist now on this issue. My son started to, get identified when he was 3. He was in a private preschool at that time. And so he's, a different child. He learns differently, and I don't think that a lot of times when the school discipline issue comes up, nobody takes into account other factors on why the child is misbehaving or being disruptive. He has a different learning style. He's a kinesthetic learner. He's a boy. He likes to move. He likes to touch things. And so the way the American classroom is set up is not set up that way. So he will get into a lot of trouble. So I decided, and I've known Professor Randall for a number of years, and I thought this would be a great ally to have. And we just got together and had a meeting in her house actually, and because I was having a lot of troubles, and I didn't know what to do. I went to the Ohio Department of the Civil Rights Commission and filed a complaint for my son, and I eventually went to the U.S. Department of Education. The office for this area is in Cleveland. And so I have the name and contact number for the person who actually handles education issues in Cleveland. So that's how I got involved in this. And I've continued since my son is now in 2nd grade. Like I said, he's in Dayton, Dayton Public School. So, and Dignity in Schools campaign is in collaboration with us on this. This is a national campaign, so this is not just a Dayton issue.
But the report card is...
The report card is just Ohio.
And we're the only group in the nation that has done the report card.
Right.
And one of the reasons, I'm a teacher, and that anything that ain't graded ain't valued. Yeah. I mean, that's what in the end result, the Ohio report card comes out and people scramble when they look at the Ohio report card. Oh, I got an F or an A or C or B or D in this area, that area. But school discipline is not on the report card. And so school discipline is like people are doing, I'm not discounting that people are doing stuff, but I say it's like having the school discipline in terms of the preventing the school to prison pipeline. People obviously are engaged in school discipline. But in terms of looking at ways to prevent the school to prison pipeline, people, it's a priority in the sense that it's item 5 on a 10-item list, and they know they're only going to get the 3 things. And so it becomes it becomes something that is done, but not a high priority. Once you start grading something, they can disagree with your methodology, they can disagree with your whatever, but in the end, the grade is there. And people have to begin to say, oh, if this is going to be a regular thing, if my community, and part of the issue is how much value will the community put in it. If the community doesn't think it's of value, then it may not have much of an impact because it just be something we did. But on the other hand, if people begin to say and ask teachers, ask principals, ask superintendents, why did our school district get this grade on the discipline report card? And then 2-3 years down the line, I think it will have a significant impact. And that's why we decided to do other Colorado.
Yeah, there's another organization that, again, as a part of this national campaign, Dignity in Schools campaign. They did, they call theirs a report card.
But it's not a report card. All they do is give you a lot
They're
of
out of
data.
Colorado.
Okay, what they did is take the same data we got
From their state.
From their state, say it's a report card, but in the end, they didn't say, they refused to say, put a value judgment. That's essentially what we've done, is we've taken the data and we put a value judgment on the interpretation of the data. And that's how we got involved. Yes, sir. Did you have a?
Sure. Do you have any data or about the diversity of the staffs at these institutions? I mean, I think that that might be a good cross-reference, or just to see if it makes a difference or not. I don't know if it would. I'm just asking.
That's a good
That's a very
question.
good question.
We don't have that information. The data that we have is what's reported in the Ohio Advanced Report. Now, the question becomes, should we be asking the Ohio Department of Education
To start
to start asking do school districts to report that data? And if they start reporting it, then we can start correlating our things with it. That's an excellent idea.
Right. And I mean, not to get off your topic of racial diversity, but I'm the fatherhood coordinator for Job and Family Services, so I think a lot of the issues that your son is probably going through, has to do with, I know my son goes to Northmont. When he was in elementary school, he had one male teacher in the entire school. Unfortunately, he hasn't involved dad, but, I know, fortunately for me, I played sports and stuff growing up, so that was a big outlet for me, but I know for a lot of young men, that's an issue as well, but, I think it still would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, that's something that we could ask for.
And I think that's something that if other people in the communities ask for, saying, we want, to the Ohio, for our perspective, we need to be able to use a central source of data collection.
Yes.
And so that's the Ohio Department of Education. If there's something that people, we need them to collect the data so that all we have to do is manipulate it in a SPS file. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. Now that you have the data, what's your plan on what involvement has the school districts involved in this report?
None.
The school districts, we just released it today, first of all. The school districts have not, well, are you asking, have we been involved with the school district?
No, I think in terms of this report. Right,
Right.
in this particular.
Okay, we just released it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're already getting responses.
We decided, again, we decided to use the data on the Ohio Advanced Report, and we decided that if that was wrong, then that was their problem, not ours.
Okay.
And that we weren't going to go school district by school district and say, is this data correct? Do you want to update your data? What we will do is use whatever they report to the Ohio Advanced Report. So next year, 2014, we'll use the data that they report for 2014. Now, it is our opinion, of course, that the data is about 6 months old, at least. And so I'm sure school districts, Dayton has undertaken to do some things that are different. And so I think Dayton could say, well, this is not where we are right now. Well, what we can only use, just like the academic report card reflects 2013, 2014, this school discipline report card reflects 2013, 2014. We are going to allow school districts anyone actually, each school district has a separate page on our website. And on that page is not only a summary of all the information, but a summary of all the data. And the school district is willing to set up an account and put on their web page new information or additional information that they think is important for people to know.
Yeah.
Yes. And we'll make that known to school districts that they can do that if they like.
The important thing is that the school districts report this information themselves to the Ohio Department of Education. So all we do is turn around and data mine it. They've reported this information.
Yeah.
I guess I was also thinking about in terms of like solutions, so that they don't end up in Mr. Newsom's office. Are there some things that, taking the data and your report, are you going to be working with the school district? I was just curious.
I thought that's what you were asking, and so my answer is, because I have a son in Dayton, we've already been working specifically, with Dayton, but this report itself is new information. We've worked, with Dayton Public Schools, and they have actually changed a lot of their school discipline things. They're going in the right direction. I mean, there's some other things that we think could change, but they're at least going in the right direction. I mean, I know other parents are concerned about other school districts in the Miami Valley, and so they could use this information and start making those changes as well in their own school district.
We push for school districts to stop suspensions completely of preschool to third grade.
Yes.
As a solution to implement a restorative justice sort of approach for all grades, to stop the suspension for disobedient behavior and implement something, restorative justice, quality in school. I have to put quality because in school suspension can be just as bad as out of school. A quality in school suspension program, but something that keeps the student in an educated environment. I think New Jersey, for instance, has a wonderful solution. For New Jersey has a law that doesn't, and California just implemented the law.
Lawful defiance, which would be disruptive or disobedient behavior here.
No, and no suspension for preschool through third grades, but New Jersey has no suspension for preschool. And they have, and this is what I think is wonderful, they have at teams, people say, but what about a student who's biting? And what about a student who's throwing chairs? And what about a student who's cursing? And, I've seen those little hellions, but the answer is not to suspend them because that doesn't change their behavior. And New Jersey has implemented, you cannot suspend them, and there's a team that goes and helps put together a plan to how to work to change that. They treat it, they treat it like a disability. That is, they don't call it a disability, and it's not. But what they say is, a child with this kind of behavior problems needs a plan to change it. And they have task force teams that come in when you have a child that is engaging in those kinds of behaviors.
Well, I think it's a good approach. I mean, we've seen that with what we call returning citizens now, ex-offenders, as you may call them. But returning citizens, where we have a lot of different people in the community, that are available to them and help them with the various things that they need. I think that's the same thing for kids. I mean, some of them act out because of, like you said, they're different type of learners. Some of them have home problems. Some have a lot of different things. You have a lot of different, people that are assessing them. That they have the best chance of getting, what they need. So I think that's an excellent approach. Hopefully,
Schools will take it up.
We'll get on board with that.
Yeah.
Right. No, I agree.
And we're also working on the state level to try to get the state to do something.
Yeah, we're actually working
Both
with the state
get a moratorium and to fund some kind of team approach for preschool to third. Because we fundamentally believe that a lot of the problems that we see, excessive problems that we see now in ultimate grades, started without correction in the preschool to third grade. And just is kind of promoting the kid without correcting the problem, and they just go up and up and up, and then suddenly they're at an age where you
juvenile justice is involved
in all of that kind of stuff.
The statistics and the data is there on that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the federal government finally recognized it and, hey, putting the nation's school districts on notice, we're paying attention to this disability, racial disparity, and giving them guidance on how they can make those changes. I think another important thing, she mentioned California, so this is a nationwide issue, right? We have states who are taking steps in the right direction. Portland public schools were just fined by the Oregon State of Education because of their racial disparity. It's ridiculous. And so,
And I don't think the racial disparity is greater than some of the ones we're reporting here in the state.
Yeah. And so these are also places where the Dignity in Schools campaign have a number of organizations working at the state and local level to make sure that, our children can have the right to a quality education within a human rights framework. So looking at the child and wanting to deal with what's going on, like you said, whatever is happening with that child, we want to figure out what's going on and keep them in an educative environment and not suspend them. And especially younger kids, giving them the message that they're not wanted. Every time I do something, I'll get expelled from the classroom or the school or whatever, and so they're missing out on that learning time. And here in the state of Ohio, we have a third grade reading guarantee. In our opinion, it makes no sense to repeatedly suspend students preschool through third grade and expect them to pass a reading test in third grade. It just doesn't make sense.
We're hoping that one of the things, this follow-up to your question, we're hoping that what will happen from this in terms of interaction with our group is that this does become a tool that we can use to engage in a conversation with teachers, a conversation with school administrators, a conversation with parents, church groups, and we'd like, we're open for invitations to come and present this report and more specific data on a specific school district if people are interested in having that. Yes? No?
No, sorry.
Hey, like the bidding. Yes, sir.
2 questions. Where can that report be seen online?
racialjusticenow.org. So one altogether, www.racialjusticenow.org. And you can get, like I said, it's about 500 pages, but everything is there for for each school district, like she said, to identify their specific school district. They have a one-page report for each school district, and they can also sign up or sign in to upload new information if they like.
We don't have a printed report, it's all online. We have printed summaries it will be online, and the Miami Valley as a summary. And we'll also do a summary for the urban school districts.
The urban 8.
The urban 8 school districts.
Cleveland,
But
Columbus.
everything else is online. racialjusticenow.org.
Second question, you mentioned doing some work at the state level. Has there been some proposed bills or legislation in regards to school discipline?
The only legislation was, the last session was Senate Bill 167, which would repeal Ohio's zero tolerance law. And we went to several Senate Education Committee meetings on that, and it did not make it, it didn't even come up for a vote. But we're still working with our local representatives, Senator Lanner, representatives.
And Senator Lanner has been quite helpful.
Very supportive.
And there may be a possibility of getting something passed after the
Election.
After the
politics.
elections.
November is the governor election, a lot of state offices, so not a whole lot going on right now, but after that.
The big problem is nobody wanted to pass, the headlines to read, senators get rid of zero tolerance. You know, so it's possible that once we get past elections, you know, people will be much more willing. There wasn't as much opposition. We've had discussions with a number of people about some kind of moratorium on preschool to third on the state level, and that's, some people are interested in that idea, especially that it hooks up really nicely with the third grade guarantee, to say basically what Maria said. How can we talk about having a third grade guarantee if you are suspending people out of school? Even one day of missing school puts them one day behind, and so now then they're going to have to pass this third grade test. So I think people see that. Our position is we really want to see some money come along with that to help school districts implement some model programs on how to deal with helping students.
And like everything else, I mean, with these legislatures, they always look to other states to see a model. A lot of times they'll look at it and see, okay, well, how's this? Because the third grade reading guarantee was totally modeled off of Florida, right here. And so they can look at other schools, California as an example, New Jersey as an example, who are taking steps on school discipline, and decide to make those changes as well here in the state.
What we would hope on a local level is that our school district, and I think our school district has moved on a practice level, we still need to get some policy changes in terms of saying that it's our policy not to suspend these kids, and not just that we have the practice. Other questions? We really appreciate you all coming out.
Thank you so much. Like I said again, at 6 o'clock, Weston Community Center, 3730 Delphus Avenue, West Dayton.
Please share it with anyone you know. And,
Any other parents, this is about parents, having that, this is valuable information for parents. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.